Hi, Ivan.
Hi.
I hope you're fine. You look good.
Yeah. I even feel guilty. So good I look.
Because I see you are quite busy in talks, in Zoom talks all over. You can be the pure academic and comment, but sometimes you're asked to show kind of an activist, more activistic role in protecting something. What's your role in times like this?
I very much believe that the most important kind of a story that personally I want to present is the freedom to disagree with people with whom you normally agree. Strangely enough, for me, this is quite important because in this challenging time, people go tribal for good reasons. The world is becoming very uncertain. You don't want to be on your own in this world. We reach a moment in which it's very difficult to basically influence somebody that does not share your basic assumptions about the world.
If you would be Ivan Krastev, somebody being responsible for the European Union, what would you do?
This is like, imagine that you're prime minister of your own country. This is like, imagine that you're in hell and how you're going to entertain yourself. For me, I was shocked in the beginning of the crisis, particularly in March, where you see such a different governments, with such a different societies, with, by the way, such a different numbers of how people are infected or not, doing exactly the same. Locking down and basically saying this and that. And my question was why? If I was a prime minister in the first stage, probably I was going to do the same that others did. I was going to lock down. I was going to try to make people understand that they should be scared. Because this is the interesting story. All the previous crises that we have, the message was don't panic. Now the message was do panic.
There was an interesting shift in the role of science in politics. And for me, it was interesting to observe that how difficult it was for the public to understand that science is here to develop its opinion and maybe even change it by getting more and more knowledge, whereas in politics, a changing opinion is something very dangerous because you feel like you were weak or you were not strong enough. Did this kind of also reflect on your role as a public intellectual being heard by not only politicians but by a wider range of people?
Politics is just the opposite to art. Russian art critic Viktor Shklovsky has this great definition basically of art who said the method of the art is to make familiar looks unfamiliar. You have a chair and you're basically by just taking the chair and putting it into the exhibition room, you push people to see it as something that they don't know. Politicians are the opposite. They try to make unfamiliar looks familiar. Because basically this is the way you're coping with the level of uncertainty and anxiety of the people. So when you have a new crisis, the most important for the politicians is to say, calm down. This is like the previous crisis that we solved together.
Did you observe something? You have kind of a more pluralistic situation of society where science is a voice amongst others, right? And then there are countries which are more authoritarian or which develop more authoritarian in the last years. All of a sudden you have an authority there beyond, the authority, right? Which is science, which makes, a semi-dictator or somebody who says he's kind of a tribalistic leader or whatever, a bit small.
The moment in kind of a pandemics, societies are infected with fear. You're going basically to make many trade-offs in order to stay alive and uninfected. People believed wrongly that authoritarian leaders are going to be the major beneficiaries of this crisis. And that's not true. And this is not
it's
true.
Not true.
It's
yeah.
not true.
It's not true.
And this is not true for a very simple reason. The most important freedom that every authoritarian leader cares about is the freedom to choose the crisis on which he responds. Because every dictator dreams to be God. And God is never solving problems that he has not created himself. So from this point...
Okay, I have to look it up in the Bible.
Authoritarian leaders are looking for crisis which is going to show their kind of a magical power to solve. And this does not work like this. And by the way, even the fact that you can have the power to do anything that you want is not helping you much because it's the level of the social trust that matters. There is not a dictator that by force can push people to wash their hands.
It seems as if, these these security laws or the thing we have lived for a very long time, which gave us the guarantee of freedom or of market society, of capitalism, how you put it, this is not there anymore.
I don't believe it was this crisis that did it. Normally the crises are not so much changing the world, but allowing to see us how the world has changed. Mm-hmm. We saw the end of a period. The two assumptions was, the first was economic interdependence means more security. And then suddenly comes a moment in which the fact that we are so much interconnected is becoming a source of insecurity, not a source of security. First, imagine, you're in a small Bulgarian village and you're learning by the television that your life is threatened by some virus being born on the other part of the world, on some Chinese market. This does not make you more secure. You can see no facial masks, no medicines. Suddenly, people said, what is happening? Globalization is making us insecure. We see it as a threat. Europeans were totally disappointed with the EU's reaction during the initial part of the crisis, the pre-economic one. Some were fine with what their governments did, some were not fine. But at the end of the day, everybody claimed that as a result of this crisis, 70% said we need more European cooperation. Because suddenly we discovered how lonely we're in the world. And then the question, who is going to win, is not anymore the question which nation state. It became much more what region of the world. How we are going to live in a world which is going apart. And this is the strange support which suddenly the European Union did not out of its success but out of its failure.
One last question, Ivan. In 1 week, if you have the right fear in place, if you can express the fear, if everybody in your population feels the same fear because it's a danger for your individual life, you can get police out in the street, you can lock the population in, the whole complex system, balance of powers, democracy, freedom of speech, whatever you want, can change its status. Do we have to be afraid?
Well, listen, probably exactly because of where I'm coming and what I have seen, I never had a doubt that it is not difficult to make and force people to trade their freedoms for safety. In the same way, basically, it reminded us how fragile this kind of freedoms to which we are used to are there. But at the same time, there was one thing that made me less scared than many other people. And this is when everybody comes with the emergency regimes. And when you basically go in your apartment and on television, you start to compare all the time what is happening in your country with what is happening in other country. Paradoxically, this dictatorship of comparisons is the best countervailing power to the dictatorship of your own political leadership. You don't have an opposition. Basically, the media is scared more than anybody else. But suddenly, you know what is happening in your country, but also you know what is happening in other countries. And this is why, for example, in most of the countries, people start lifting their extraordinary powers. It's going to be a very high risk if you're the only one staying and trying to say, beat, let's do it. So those in government has the total power, but they knew also how easily it can break down. This is a strange dynamics in which we lost our freedom, but paradoxically the governments did not get freer. The pressure on them went very strong. What I'm afraid is something different. I'm afraid that we're going to see the long tail of this freedom. You're going basically to see people much more thinking in terms of personal safety for a longer period of time. And we're going to see much more lower risk society. While we're living in a world in which not taking risk is the most risky behavior.
Okay, this was a very nice final word. Ivan, I thank you very much for joining the call. This was a very, very good final word. I think it was, for me, a very interesting conversation. I hope for you too.
Always pleasure.
When are you leaving for Bulgaria?
I'm leaving in Bulgaria on Friday.